Good day, dear students, and welcome back to our English class. You will see a series of pictures here. This, this humanoid that you see is named Sophia. She is the world's first humanoid robot. Very human-like, but not really a human. And you'll see a picture here of her in a sari. That's because she came to India as well to give a talk and to interact with a group of people. And actually, she is a humanoid that was developed in Hong Kong, and she was activated in the year 2016 on 14th of February actually. And one more interesting bit about her is that she has been given citizenship by Saudi Arabia, and there are other titles that she has also received. Plus, she has been interviewed a lot, so you can go up and check out some interviews about Sophia, and you see how she interacts. It's very fascinating to see this sort of a technology. Now, the reason why I'm talking about Sophia, a humanoid, is because the lesson we're going to be doing today is about one such humanoid. Let's see what the lesson is about. The title of the lesson is Anukul, and it is set in West Bengal, and there is a certain message that the author wishes to give us with the help of this robot. Okay, but before we move on to the chapter and try to find out what this message is, I just want you to think about how do we Indians treat our servants. I know we had done another chapter last year on a similar issue or a theme, and that chapter was called My Lord the Baby. You had the servant Raichar in there, and you know how he was treated just because he was the servant, right? How everyone doubted him, and they forgot the good that he had done, and when there was a tragedy in the family, he was the first person to be blamed, and everyone suspected him. Okay. uh, and of course that story has a different meaning at the end of it, but ultimately it does point out and it does make us consider how we Indians especially treat our servants. They do so much for us, we pay them, and we feel like, okay, we are their masters, we can do anything that we wish just because we pay them a salary at the end of the month. Okay, but is that really correct? Is that really how you're supposed to be treating another human being? Is what this story especially makes us look at. Okay, so let's see what the story is about and what happens with Anukul the humanoid. He's got a name, hasn't he? Nikunja Babu asked. Oh yes, he has. What is it? Anukul. A robot supplying agency had opened in Chaurangi about 6 months ago. Nikunja Babu had always wanted a mechanical servant. His business had lately been doing rather well, so he could now afford to fulfill this little desire. Okay, I'll read on further. Nikunja Babu looked at the robot. It was an android, which meant that it looked exactly like an ordinary human being, although it was really a machine. It was reasonably good looking, appeared to be a young man of about 22. Okay, a few things here. First of all, the word android. Now, of course, the story was written ages ago, and we're studying it in a time which is technologically much more advanced. Today, android is not necessarily humanoid. I mean, in this particular chapter, you're using the term android to refer to what you will call humanoid in today's time, right? And android is something else altogether, right? But in this, in the time when the story was written, an android was simply a concept, and that concept was a robot which looks like a human being. Okay, so in science fiction, this term android was used to refer to a robot that looks like a human being. But of course, today we do not use the word android for that. We use the word humanoid. So just understand this very clearly. Because the story was written long ago, therefore there is a different word used, right? But what we know so far is that there is a robot supplying agency in Chaurangi. It is some place in the west of Bengal, and what it does is it rents out robots to people that can afford it, of course. Okay, So we are told that Nikunja Babu is one such person, and he's a businessman. He has a little bit of money, and he wishes to go ahead and buy a robot for himself. Not buy, more of renting a robot for himself, right? And since his business was doing very well, he could afford it as well. Now we are told that something about this particular humanoid. His name is Anukul, of course, and he looked exactly like a human being, but it was a machine. And he was reasonably good looking, so not very bad looking, and he appeared to be a young man of about 22. So from the looks of it, he looked very young, about 22 years old. Okay, but he's actually a robot. Then, what kind of work will this robot do? Nikunja Babu asked. The man behind the counter lit a cigarette and replied, "He'll do more or less everything an ordinary servant does. The only thing he doesn't know is how to cook. Apart from that, he can do the washing and cleaning, make the beds, make tea, open doors and windows, just about everything. But don't send him out. He can manage everything in the house, but he couldn't go and do your shopping." And let's take it further. So, what we know so far about Anukul, the humanoid, is that he is able to do almost about anything indoors except cooking. But at the same time, he can make tea for his master. So he can do the washing, the cleaning, making of the beds, opening doors, windows, and any other, maybe lifting up a few things, cleaning up other things. He can do all of that work, but he cannot go next to the fire. He cannot cook. Okay. At the most, he can make tea, we are told, right? And he cannot do any outdoor activities because he's not familiar with the place around, and it will take him time to understand everything that goes on there. So he's not that developed as well. Okay, so this is the description that we are given so far of Anukul. And there is one condition, and we are told the person at the counter who is dealing with the renting of the robot here, he says, and you must talk to him politely. He expects one to say please and thank you. So, this is not something that you usually would say to your human servants, so to say. You will not say please and thank you to them because you believe that just because you pay them a salary at the end of the month, you can order them about any time of the day, and you don't need to use any courteous words with them, right? But in this case, one thing is made very clear, one rule is made very clear, that you have to use the words please and thank you for all the services that you will need from Anukul. Okay, that is one condition. Then Nikunja Babu asks, he says, he's not ill-tempered, I hope. So he doesn't get angry, right? Because it's a machine. If it gets angry, God alone knows what can that machine do, right? The man says, no. You'll find him troublesome only if you raise your hand. Our robots cannot stand physical assault. Now, another very important condition. So when Nikunja Babu, is just asking questions about whether Anukul can be, ill-tempered, whether he can get angry and he can start physically assaulting anybody else. The robot supplying agency, the man of the robot supplying agency, he says that this robot will not do any kind of, or he will not engage in any kind of physical assault unless you beat him. If you raise your hand, if you beat the robot, then of course he will attack you. Okay, but other than that, on his own, he's not programmed to get angry and react. He's not capable of that. Then there is no likelihood of that. But suppose someone gives him a slap, what will he do? So Nikunja Babu is just asking questions because he wants to be sure that he's not, inviting trouble, unnecessary trouble. So he says, I'm not saying that I'm going to slap him, but if at all somebody slaps him, what will the robot do? Because you just now told me that this robot cannot stand physical assault. He cannot stand someone beating him physically, right? So then this man at the counter, he says he will take revenge. So the one thing is made very clear: if you hit or if you slap the robot like you would slap your servant, if you're upset with that servant, this particular robot will take revenge. So Nikunja Babu says, how? So the man says he might use the middle finger of his right hand. He can give a high voltage electric shock with that finger. So this is how dangerous the robot can get, and only if you raise your hand on that robot. Okay, so what will Anukul do? He will use the middle finger of his right hand, and with that finger he will give you a high voltage shock, which is strong enough to kill another person. So Nikunja Babu still is just being sure. He says, can that result in death? So is that shock high enough and strong enough to kill somebody else? The man says, certainly, definitely. And the law cannot do anything about this, for a robot cannot be punished like a normal human being. But I must say, there has never been a case like that so far. Okay? So we are already given one big disclaimer here. If you hit Anukul, he will take revenge, and usually he will take revenge by just using the middle finger of his right hand and giving you a high voltage shock that can kill you. Okay, and if an incident like that happens in the future, the robot cannot be blamed because the robot is not run by the same laws that human beings are run. Okay, so a human being would have been imprisoned for a crime like that, but a robot cannot be punished. That is how complicated the matter is. So he says this is what the robot will do, but don't worry, because so far none of our robots have done anything like that. So it's not possible that you will face any sort of difficulty like that. If you are careful, if you fulfill the conditions, the robot will give you no trouble. And what are the conditions? You have to say thank you and please to the robot for any service that you need, and you need to make sure that you don't raise your hand on the robot, okay, because the robot cannot stand physical assault. Then, does he sleep at night? No, robots don't sleep. So Nikunja Babu wants to know more and more about the robot. So this is another thing which is clear. The humanoid, that is Anukul, does not sleep at all. What does he do then all night? He just sits quietly in the corner. Robots don't lack patience. Does he have a mind? Robots can, at times, feel and understand things that a human being can't. But then, not all robots are so sensitive. It's a matter of luck, really. Only time can tell how gifted a robot is. Now, sorry about that. Now, we are told about this particular robot, that is Anukul, that he has been programmed, but there is possibility of him evolving. Okay, so maybe right now he has only certain set of capabilities. Okay, but with time he can get more capabilities. He can just evolve into a different kind of a robot, a higher level of a robot. That is what the man informs Nikunja Babu here. Okay, so we are told that right now, I'll just take it from here. Robots can at times feel and understand things a human being can't. But then not all robots are so sensitive. So it is possible. That is what the story tells us, at least. It is possible for a robot to feel and understand things, even things that a human being cannot understand. But not all robots have that kind of an ability. Okay, and when it comes to Anukul, he says it's only it's only with time that you will come to know how gifted your robot is. I cannot tell you. That is what this man makes very clear. Okay, so we are not told how capable Anukul really is, but one thing is said is that there is a possibility that he can grow, he can evolve into a very different standard of a robot. Now, Nikunja Babu turned towards the robot and said, Anukul, you have no objection to working for me, have you? Why should I object? Said Anukul in a perfectly normal voice. Okay, what that tries to tell you is that Anukul doesn't speak like a usual robot. He speaks like a human being himself, and he looks like a human being because he's a humanoid. Okay, so when the new master, that is Nikunja Babu, asks him, do you have any objection with working for me? So he says, I have no objections. Why would I object? He was wearing a blue striped shirt and black shorts. His neatly brushed hair had a side parting. His complexion was fair, his teeth bright and clean, and his mouth parted in a half smile. His whole appearance inspired confidence. So this is a description, a physical description we are given of Anukul. He looked like a 22-year-old boy. He had a fair complexion, fair skin. His hair was parted on one side, and he was there with a nice smile. Okay, and he appeared very confident. That is what we are told. Okay, so he says, come along then. So Nikunja Babu says, you have no objection, so come along. I'm taking you home. Nikunja Babu's Maruti van was waiting outside. He paid for Anukul by check and came out with him. Anukul's movements were no different from those of an ordinary man. Okay, see, time and again we are reminded that Anukul looked and behaved and spoke very much like a human being. So it was easy to forget that he was actually a robot. Remember this because this is it's a crucial detail for what happens later on. Okay, so it's not possible because even Sophia, the real life humanoid that you have seen, you can tell that she's a robot. Okay, but this is just a story, it's just fiction, it's made up, right? So we're just taking liberties here. Then so Anukul's movements were no different from those of an ordinary man. Now, Nikunja Babu lived in Salt Lake. Salt Lake is a place in, again, West Bengal. I think it's in Kolkata, not sure. We're told that he lived in Salt Lake. He was not married. A few of his friends often dropped in to play cards in the evening. They had already been told about the arrival of a mechanical servant. Nikunja Babu had in fact done a bit of research before getting Anukul. Quite a number of people in the upper classes of Kolkata had already got robots to work for them. Mr. Mansukhani, Girija Bose, Pankaj Datta Roy, Mr. Chabriya, everyone said they were very satisfied and that their servant gave them no trouble at all. Our Jeevan Lal does everything immediately, just as he is told, said Mr. Mansukhani. I'm convinced he is not just a machine, he must have a real brain and a heart. Okay. Now, what we know about Nikunja Babu himself is that, first of all, he's a businessman. His business is doing very well. He is not married, therefore he can afford to spend money on all these extravagant things because he doesn't have a family to support and he has a lot of money with him. So that is another thing that is made clear to us. So that's the reason why he goes ahead with the idea of acquiring or getting a humanoid. Okay, and before he has gone ahead with that idea, he has also done his research. He had asked a lot of his other friends who belong to the upper classes of Kolkata whether their servants are good, their mechanical servants are good, because they had all gone ahead and got a mechanical servant like Anukul on rent. So he wanted to know from them whether the robot gave them any trouble or anything like that. And all of them confirmed that they were very happy with the services of the mechanical robot because they gave them no trouble whatsoever. Mr. Mansukani even said that I think that this particular robot has a real brain and a heart because he does his work so well. Okay, so the review that he has got is pretty good. So he is convinced that it's a good idea to go ahead and invest in a robot himself. Okay, and of course he asks all his questions and everything after knowing all about these people, but now that he brings Anukul back home, it is left for him to see and form an opinion of his own. The many people of the upper class Kolkata society have told him one thing. The man at the counter selling the robot told him one thing. Now what does Nikunja Babu himself have to say? Okay, so we are told Nikunja Babu formed a similar opinion within 7 days. Anukul's ways of working was just perfect. He seemed to have grasped fully the logical link between one task and another. If asked whether the water for his bath was ready, he would not only bring the water immediately but also provide a soap and a towel for his master. He would then get his master's clothes and shoes and everything else that might be needed. And he did everything so willingly that there was no question of being impolite to him. Okay, so we are told that in the first week itself, within the first 7 days, Nikunja Babu was impressed with Anukul, and he realized that it's the same thing that his friends had told him about their mechanical servants, because there was no mistake whatsoever when it comes to Anukul's work. Whenever he was told to just see whether the water for his bath was ready, that was just one command, right? Asking the robot to go and see whether the water is ready. But Anukul understood that if the master is asking him to check whether the water is ready, that means the master wants to have a bath. So Anukul on his own, without being told, would go ahead and get a soap and he would get the towel ready and he would make sure that even the master's clothes and the shoes, that are required after the bath, even that is kept ready. So a very logical series of work he would undertake without being told. Okay, so this robot, we already, you can understand, is quite smart. Anukul is not an ordinary robot, and he's growing. His capabilities are growing. Okay, and but as for Nikunja Babu, the master here, he is very happy with the robot because he does everything without even being told. Okay, and so there was no question of being very impolite to him. He didn't have to raise his voice or even think of hitting him because he did his work so well. Okay, so what we know about the chapter so far is that there is a man named Nikunja Babu who lives in the west of Bengal. He is a businessman and he's unmarried, and he's always had this desire to acquire a humanoid. What is a humanoid? A humanoid is a robot that looks like a human being and functions like a human being. It's the nearest a machine can come to a human being. When it comes to replacing a human being, that is a humanoid, right? So he goes to this agency that deals with renting out these robots, and he acquires one robot. The name of that robot is Anukul. Anukul looks very much like a human being. He looks like a 22-year-old boy with a nice, clean, and a nicely groomed face, and his hair is nicely parted. He's fair. And he exudes confidence. There's something about him, and he's also very polite. Okay, and we are told that Nikunja Babu brings him home, and within the first 7 days, Nikunja Babu is pretty impressed with Anukul, because Anukul does the work without even being told sometimes. Okay, you just tell him one thing and he will carry out all the related tasks to that one order as well without being told. Okay, so and yes, there are two conditions that the man at the counter had told Nikunja Babu. There are two points that Nikunja Babu has got to be careful about. One is that whenever he tells Anukul to do something, he has got to use words like thank you and please. And the second thing is that nobody is supposed to raise a hand on Anukul, because if you raise a hand on Anukul, he will get angry and he will seek revenge. And how does he seek revenge? He will usually use his middle finger on the right hand and give that person an electric shock which can kill the other person. Okay, so there are these two conditions that must be fulfilled. Otherwise, there is no trouble that Anukul will give anybody. That is what the man at the robot agency had told Nikunja Babu. Okay, we will stop right here for today's class, and in the next class we will see what happens with Anukul and Nikunja Babu. Thank you.